Jose Morales was sleeping on cardboard boxes in a garage in Compton, California. Before the sun came up, he would walk to a nearby bus stop where he would ride the bus for 2 hours to the Los Angeles International Airport where he worked as a janitor. On 2 occasions, he was mugged while waiting for the bus. Working 40 hours a week for minimum wage, this was the best he could do. But then Jose's situation improved drastically. As Robert Pollan, an economist at the University of Massachusetts, reports, Jose received health insurance and a 36% raise. He had enough to rent his own apartment and to buy a car. It all happened because Jose started to receive the living wage. What is the living wage, you ask? Well, it's not the same as the minimum wage. The minimum wage is set by Congress and is the same in every part of the country. The living wage goes beyond the minimum wage. As the Wall Street Journal reported in August 2013, the living wage is tied to the local cost of living and can vary from location to location. Its purpose is to help workers and their families meet the most basic standard of living, even when that standard of living is higher than the minimum wage. I first heard about the living wage last semester in my econ class. After researching it for this speech, I've come to the same conclusion as numerous economists and public policy researchers. The living wage can help the working poor without adversely affecting businesses or the health of the economy. That's why we need to pass federal legislation mandating a living wage that can help people secure the basic necessities of life. So let's first look at the difficulties faced by the working poor, and then we'll look at the living wage solution. Poverty remains a significant problem in the United States, in part because the wages have not kept up with the cost of living. According to a recent study of the Bureau of Labor Statistics, more than 46 million Americans live in poverty. Of these 46 million, 10 million are referred to as the working poor, people who are employed at least 27 weeks a year and who are still stuck in poverty. Of these 10 million people, half, 5 million, are employed full-time. They work 40 hours a week, 52 weeks a year, but they still can't make ends meet. How can that be? It happens in part because of the federal minimum wage. Since 2009, the minimum wage has been $7.25 an hour. If you calculate that, someone working full-time would earn just over $15,000 a year. For an individual, that's just above the poverty line. The problem comes when there are 2, 3, or 4-person households, as with a single mother trying to squeak by. It's almost impossible to raise a family on $15,000 a year. Another problem is that the federal minimum wage doesn't change until Congress changes it. And we all know how long it can take for Congress to do anything. In fact, it took Congress more than 10 years to raise the minimum wage from its previous $5.25 to its current rate of $7.25. As a result, millions of workers are still earning in 2008 what they had earned in 1998. The result was a lost decade of wage growth, according to the State of Working America, published in 2012 by the Cornell University Press. The same book predicts another lost decade if we don't take action soon. So what can we do? How can we help make sure that people who work full-time earn enough money to lift themselves and their families above poverty level? One way is to implement a federally mandated living wage. The first city in America to institute a living wage was Baltimore in 1994. Since then, the living wage movement has spread to more than 140 jurisdictions. However, as David Newmark, Matthew Thompson, and Leslie Coyle reported in the 2012 issue of the Journal of Labor Policy, most living wage laws cover only people who work for companies with government contracts. At best, only 1% of workers in a city receive the living wage. It's time to cover everyone who works full-time and to do so with the National Living Wage Law. Here's how such a law would work. First, we would calculate the living wage for every county in the United States. To do that, we'd use the living wage calculator created by Amy Glassmeyer, a professor of urban studies and planning at MIT. Based on this calculator, the living wage in Chicago, my hometown, for this year would be $10.48 per hour. In Dallas, it would be $9.29. In New York, it would be $12.75. As you can see, there is large variation between the cost of living in different parts of the country. A national living wage would account for these variations. Second, we would tie the living wage to the Consumer Price Index. The Consumer Price Index tracks the price of goods and services in different parts of the country. As the Consumer Price Index increases, the living wage would increase at the same rate. In Chicago, the Consumer Price Index rose by 2% last year. The living wage in that city would then go from $10.48 an hour to $10.69 an hour. And it would cover everyone who works full-time, whether they work for the government or in the private sector. In this way, we can ensure that wages for everyone keep up with the cost of living. As you might expect, there is opposition to instituting a living wage policy. Those who oppose the living wage offer two main arguments. First, they argue that the living wage would be too costly for businesses. But that's not what Jeff Thompson and Jeff Chapman, researchers at the Economic Policy Institute, found. After surveying existing living wage laws, they found that the increased cost of wages is offset by higher productivity and lower employee turnover. Happier workers means stronger businesses. The second argument of critics is that the living wage will lead to fewer jobs. But again, the research doesn't bear this out. A 2011 study in Economic Development Quarterly by T. William Lester, a professor at the University of North Carolina, found that living wage laws do not have a large negative impact on employment. In a 2012 study, Lester found that living wage laws can actually create jobs of higher quality. In addition to being good for workers, a living wage law can benefit businesses and the economy in general. In conclusion, the time has come to pay American workers a wage that will keep up with the cost of living. We need a federally mandated living wage. In a time of massive corporate profits and skyrocketing executive pay, those at the bottom of society deserve to advance along with those at the top. Those like Jose Morales, who I mentioned at the start of my speech, deserve a better future. Everyone thinks that working here at the airport we must earn a lot of money, Morales says. It's not true, but at least now with the living wage we can hold our heads up high. And that's something everyone working a full-time job should be able to say.